Very well. I think I'll say it again quickly just because it's on the record. Leslie Perrier here, New York State Opioid Treatment Authority, um, also known as the SOTA, the Bureau Director of Adult Treatment Services here with OASAS. Going to turn it over to Jason Rubenfeld.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Jason Rubenfeld of the SOTA's office, Clinical Integration Advisor, and happy to see all of you today. Also, we have two other moderators today who are here to help answer questions at the end. Lucia, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Lucia Perfetti-Clark. I'm the project director for the Opioid Settlement Funds.
And Celine.
Hi, everyone. Celine, and I'm a project coordinator for the Opioid Settlement Funds.
And we also have Pat Lincourt, who I'm sure needs no introduction, but Pat, you can
Hello,
introduce yourself.
everybody. Sorry, I'm joining a little late. Hello to everybody. Thank you, Jason.
Right. Leslie, anything you want to say before I start?
No, I think we're each here for a short time, lots to cover. Again, thank you all for being here, and this is a very important meeting where you'll get to hear a lot of information. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jason.
So thank you, Leslie, and again, thank you everyone for joining us. Throughout the presentation / discussion, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat box or raise your hand. I do see a hand raised already, but I can't imagine there's any questions. But if there is, please put it in the chat box. I see there's 3 questions. Please put it in the chat box and we'll answer them as soon as possible. So the reason we call this meeting today is it's been a while since we've had a conversation with the OTPs regarding integration. About 2 to 3 years ago, we met to introduce the topic, and it focused predominantly on co-located OTP and outpatient programs, and also adding an OTP to an outpatient program. And thankfully, at this point, we have seen a lot of interest in both of those. Between the 2 initiatives that we have provided funding for, we have had 26 programs apply for 26 programs receive funding, and also we've had 15 programs integrate without funding. So we are seeing a lot of interest, and we just wanted to have a conversation today to talk a little bit more about our vision and also how do we move forward with that vision. So the first thing that I want to talk about, for those who may be new to it, what is integration? Because I think we just need to build a little bit of a backbone for that. So integration, we're not talking about integrating physical and mental health. That's a totally different integration, for which obviously we would love to have that as part of this initiative, but we're starting with the integration of outpatient H22 and OTP H22 programs. So what happens is, for all intents and purposes, you integrate it into one physical program with all services being shared. But at least at this point, and we'll have a lot more to talk about, there still is 2 PRUs and 2 billing mechanisms. However, it's 1 operating certificate, so you would only have 1 audit for the program. As part of our vision, and this is where we just want to provide a little update, as part of our vision, we do foresee a day where there will be 1 PRU, there'll be parity in billing, and the program that you will not have to continue doing it the way it's being done now. I don't know, Pat, if you want to talk a little bit about where we are with both of those.
Yeah, so right now, that is, Jason just said it exactly right. We're looking for clinical integration and can allow for all kinds of integration to happen at that level. So there can be shared staffing, so that a counselor could see people who are on methadone officially in the PRU related to the OTP, as well as have a caseload of people from the clinic. There could be shared groups, and the mechanisms for being able to report on this are really fiscal then. So you have your fiscal reporting where you allocate your staff to the amount of time that they're spending in either. And there is no need for consents between the programs. You're really officially operating as one unit under Part 822. What we have not yet been able to solve, but are working on, is both the billing and the OASAS program reporting unit. Billing, we didn't have parity in the base rate for, and I'm sure many of you are aware of this, the base rate for outpatient clinic is higher than the OTP. And the reason that happened at the very beginning of APGs was because the volume was just so different that at that time we just went with the separate base rates. We recognize that it is an impediment to being able to operate as a single clinic, and we have a plan to create that parity. It will require some weight changes and in order to get there, but there would no longer be a differential. If you billed for an individual session in an outpatient program, it would pay the same as if you bill for an individual in the OTP. So that's the billing side of it, and we're on our way. We don't yet have full approval of that. We're anticipating that we will have it, and we'll be able to implement that in October of this year. So it's moving. And we will have a separate webinar about that with providers once we have the approval from to be able to move forward. The second piece is the program reporting unit, and we are in active conversations with our internal DMRP about how to achieve that. And right now, the biggest issue for us is that the PAS forms are slightly different. And the PAS forms for outpatient don't collect information about methadone. And we know that people who are on methadone are in treatment longer. They have an annual report rather, as well as discharge reporting. But so we're looking to standardize that and be able to create a single PRU for an integrated program. And we're hoping to align that with October because we're not yet sure what the IT aspect of that would be. We can't guarantee that, but we're hoping for fall of this year for that single PRU. So what that will do is that would finally make the integration in, both the clinical and the program aspects just totally complete for providers. So we wanted you to be aware that that's where we're moving toward. In the meantime, we've had some very successful integrations of, and Jason will talk a little bit more about this, of all three models. So that is the model that was an outpatient program that adds the federal designation and the SAMHSA and OASAS approval to do DEA approval, very important as well, to provide methadone. We've also had co-located programs come together further and really operate as a single program. And we've had, I think, only one or two providers who were methadone integrate outpatient services, but we've had some success with that as well. So all three of those are options, and we've had RFAs out to help with that in the past, and we're interested in continuing to pursue that. To and I think 3 years ago, what we said is our long-term vision was to have every outpatient service be able to provide methadone in a very integrated way. Every methadone provider be providing a full range of addiction services. So of course that's not going to happen overnight, and providers may be in different places about their readiness about this, and we're recognizing this as a slow evolution rather than an immediate change for the field. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Jason, and then he can facilitate from here. But I appreciate it, Jason. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Pat. So to touch upon a little bit of what you were talking about, we've had success. I think the biggest success is we have programs in regions where we haven't had in the past, by having outpatient programs adding the methadone. And the programs for the majority of the programs are seeing a large amount of admissions to their programs. So we see that there's still a need for the programs throughout the regions. There are obviously some, with the current model, and to answer the question, Dr. Lowe, the difference between the two PRUs, you have an outpatient PRU, which is patients who are receiving counseling services, all types of services, but not methadone. And then you have the OTP PRU, which is those who are receiving methadone. In the past, if somebody needed more intensive treatment, they would be dual enrolled or referred to another outpatient program or OTP. Integration allowed one program to provide all services without having two PRUs, without having the dual enrollment, without the potential billing issues that come with dual enrollment. And what we're seeing is that part is a success. Patients are receiving more treatment. Stigma is slowly unraveling in those programs. Staff have, for the most part, come on board with the integrated program. Patients are on board with the integrated program. They're able to admit more patients to the program because there's because you're able to share the staff. There's patients are going to more groups because, again, more groups are available. Traditionally, outpatient programs have had more groups than OTPs, and integrating the programs gives the ability for the OTP patients to attend groups that in the past were not readily available. So we are
If
seeing
I could
successes.
jump in, sorry, Jason,
Mhm.
what you're saying is so important. Just for everybody to know, this is such an opportunity for the patients in our system of care, for
Mhm.
yourselves, for your staff. That kind of no wrong door is available, and it's available now, right? And so eliminating stigma, somebody who might have felt othered in the past by being on OTP services, might actually now feel more part of something bigger than just being in a box of OTP, which is they self-stigmatize. So now everybody gets to work together, providers, your staff, and most important, the patients that we serve. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah. And in the past, you would have to have duplicate staff members, for instance, duplicate admissions processes. Now you don't, which opens the ability for more counselors, more medical staff, more nursing, more peers to do work with the patients rather than doing other things that you can now consolidate. Of course, there's some areas that, are work in progress. Um, reporting is still separate, as we mentioned. Billing, you still have to bill separately. From speaking to providers, the units of service in groups and other parts, can get a little bit confusing. But for the most part, what I'm hearing from the providers, the benefits do outweigh the current issues that they're seeing. However, that's always a caveat of but we'd love up one PRU. As Pat mentioned, we're almost there. So that part, hopefully by next year, would not be impediment for anybody who wants to do integration. So that was just a little bit of update on where we are. In addition to putting out the integration and also the new model, we have fortunately been able to put some funding to it. As I said earlier, we awarded 14 programs through SAP. We awarded 12 programs through settlement funds, and we are continuing to look in ways where we can continue to provide some startup funding for programs who want to integrate. However, and one of the areas where it is lacking, as Pat mentioned, is programs integrating an outpatient to their current OTP services. Why is that important? So right now we have outpatients adding OTPs so they could provide services to anybody. We have the co-located programs who are doing the same. Then we now have standalone OTPs who are continuing to provide services just to individuals who are on methadone or other MAT. As integration, evolves, as more programs do it, that may make it more difficult for just the OTPs in different ways. Because again, the model that is using is just one population. So we want to give everybody opportunity to provide services to all populations. And again, we're also seeing access to care, especially with OTPs. As much as we have worked with providers to open OTPs over the past year, there are still numerous regions in the state that do not have OTPs, which we'll continue to work on through the RFAs and working with providers to integrate. And there's other areas where there are OTPs, but then there's limited options for outpatient counseling. So again, to make it a more, and part of this is business model, rather than having multiple programs, you have one, especially once we have the PRU, which will make it more efficient to be able to provide services to everyone. We wanted to have this conversation to make sure that if there is future funding, everybody is aware that, one, it's not going to happen forever. So if we do put it out, I would recommend that for those who are even considering doing it, to put in, because all funding is, not forever. But we also are urging OTPs, and as Pat said, the long-term plan is all programs to be able to do this. Get in at the beginning, get in where there is some support, some assistance, because eventually it's going to have to be done in the future, and we can't promise any fiscal support at that time.
I think, can I also add here,
Yeah.
because I think this is important, one of the things that, we're watching to see what's happening. We're watching to see, do overall patients increase in OTPs. So there is likely, as fentanyl, is staying with us, more demand ultimately for methadone overall. And so by creating better access and allowing more providers, we're expanding the people who are likely to be able to go to an OTP. Right now, we're seeing a pretty stable OTP population, and some shifting geographically, but we're not seeing OTPs in maybe an isolated OTP or two, but in the main, OTPs are not losing patients. They're also staying pretty stable. So, how are those two things true? I think it's more of a geographic kind of a change, that there is from provider to provider, maybe more opportunities to grow. And so, that's part of the reason that the providers aren't losing patients. But ultimately, the closer we get to that state where all SUD providers can provide all SUD care, and along with methadone, we do expect that there could be some change in how people seek services and where they seek them. And so I think diversifying the ability to reach out to people with other than opioid use disorder, so to reach a larger, group of folks who have cocaine disorder and to see them, providing, care that wouldn't necessarily include medication, families and family members, and to provide just a wider group of, a wider referral base could be helpful for OTPs as well. So, although I do think that it's a more, there may be a little longer runway to really achieving that, like, the day after you get certified to be both, it's going to take time. In one of the providers that I'm aware, it is a really slow build to populations of people who are not on methadone. And that's fine. We're expecting that. And OASAS has provided a lot through Jason's efforts and his team, a lot of technical assistance to, try to understand how to reach out to other referral sources, make sure people are aware, of what services you're offering. But I do, we have not had much demand for this. And, one of the things we wanted to achieve today is to let people know why we're seeing it as important and to answer any questions people have about it. So I just wanted to, make those points as well.
So just to answer questions as they come in, will there be funding for existing integrate programs as they grow and the need for adequate staffing? So we're continuing to monitor that and have internal discussions about programs who have not received funding through any of the other initiatives. At this point, there's not much more we can share, but that is something that is on our minds. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and I think we can add, Jason, that our issue is that once, and granted that the programs that went ahead and did this without funding were really thought leaders, and we really appreciated their willingness and ability to do that. We can't supplant with any of the funding streams that we have. So that money that's already been spent to achieve something. So I just wanted to point out that we have very real constraints on what we would be able to do. And we are thinking about that and trying to identify, potential costs that could be reimbursed.
And, just to add and clarify, it would be only new spending. So if you spent money on your EHR or hired another staff member in the past, we wouldn't be able to cover that. But if you have to add new staff or you never made the changes to the EHR, that would be something that if we're able to provide, that's where we would be able to provide the funding for. The other question, in the integrated program, how are patients admitted who do not meet state and federal admission criteria for the OTP? So right now, because there's 2 PRUs, they're admitted to the outpatient program. If it's just for counseling and groups and regular treatment services. When it's under 1 PRU, and as Pat said, we will have more conversations as that gets closer. There will be different ways to identify which individual is a OTP patient and which one is a regular outpatient. But that's something where we'll talk about as the time gets closer. And do they have to be under one roof, or can they be in one campus? We find that it's most effective where it's under one roof, and not just even under one roof in the same area. So where, and I didn't talk about this earlier, but with integration, you have the whole program, counseling, groups, other services in an area that is unrestricted. And then you have the separate area of the dosing room and any of the medical rooms, which should be only available to individuals who are receiving MAT services. So we really ideally want, on one floor. Obviously, in some places there'll be multiple floors, but the multiple floors shouldn't be, okay, you're receiving here, you're receiving there, don't go to the other floors. So we want unrestricted access to the counseling areas, and then limited access to the dosing areas. Is funding only available for not-for-profit of deficit funded programs? Fortunately, the funding streams that we've had available to us have only been available for the not-for-profits. And Pat, anything else to add to that? I got nothing else.
Jason, I'm sorry, before we move on, just to pivot back to the separate area for the dosing areas, and that's as per the DEA as well, because
Mhm.
they have their own guidelines in terms of access to where patients' medications are being dispensed. So, while we all appreciate everyone having this ability now to have the no wrong door, et cetera, there's still going to be some requirements in terms of federal regulations for that, but everything else is going to be completely integrated.
Mhm. And we
Lucia,
Sorry,
Lucia,
Jason,
did
I
you
was
want to?
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just going to speak a little bit to the non-for-profit. So the OSF, the opioid settlement funds are considered state aid. So those can only go to non-for-profit. But I think what hopefully everybody on this call is here to get information if you're contemplating making this move. When these RFAs go out, it is slightly different in that this is not an ongoing project, right? This is a one-time cost. So we are asking you to submit a proposal to integrate your programs. Essentially, if you think about it in terms of your budget as like a startup, what do you need to do to get the lift going in 1 year? What would you spend your budget on? I would encourage anybody on this call, sorry, Jason, I'm about to give you some more work, but anybody on this call to really reach out to Jason, because there are, in addition to, let's say we do provide another opportunity for integration under OSF funds, those dollars, those budgeted dollars are used for certain things in your integration. That doesn't mean that there are not other state dollars available depending on your program. So I would reach out to Jason because I know that a lot of this particular integration project oftentimes is I don't want to say construction, but like you might be rearranging your physical space. And so Jason is, I think, a great starting point in that we could be talking to you and working with you in terms of where your particular program is at, and that you may have more than one option in terms of pursuing some support down this path. Does that sound true, Pat? Did I?
Yes. Sounds good. Yes, that's all I think we can really say right now.
Yeah. Will there be funding opportunities available for capital funding to move two existing programs to one building? So with the settlement RFA, there was funding in that to do that, to move minor renovations. So that part is yes. There is also, which, I'm glad you asked that question because we recently did have conversations about capital funding. There's other areas, other opportunities available for capital funding if that's really all that you're looking for. If it's, not the other parts in the RFA, but you're just looking for capital funding, I would recommend reaching out to the regional office. They'll have more information on how you can apply for capital funding only. What else? Okay. Leslie, there's a question that was sent directly to you
Okay,
that I'm not sure if you received that.
Oh, yes. Can I clarify the PRU? Okay, program report. So the question is, can I please clarify the PRU to find out what it stands for? It's Program Reporting Unit, that's correct. But what is it exactly called, right? And so it's the query is the deputy director, and she thought it was simply a number designation to a clinic for identification. It is that in many ways. A program reporting unit does designate what service goes under your operating certificate, what goes with your provider number. So typically in the past, beg your pardon, your outpatients PRU would start with a certain series of numbers. Those kind of things like Pat signaled are going to be one of these days, merged. Right now, yes, there's going to be an OTP PRU, which is one number for your program. Your outpatient services will be under another, but we're hoping to narrow it down and not have those two PRUs. I hope that answered the question.
There was another question that was less specific to integration and more about how to grow a census. I mean, part of it is marketing. Um, I know a lot of the new programs that are opening, they're doing a lot of marketing, a lot of outreach, a lot of building relationships with our outpatient programs, residential programs, criminal justice entities, um, shelters, housing provide supportive housing providers. But a lot of it is just outreach, marketing, and just working with other providers. How will this affect billing? So right now, the only way it impacts billing is, and from what I've heard from providers, um, it's just a little bit more difficult because they have to tease out who's outpatient, who's OTP. But in the future, once we're able to get the parity implemented and the one PRU, it really wouldn't. You just bill using the codes that are there, and there shouldn't really be any confusion with the billing. Pat, I don't know if you want to add anything more on that.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think that you would continue if you had an integrated program to bill under the PRU and the rate code for which the person was admitted. So, basically that means that if they're on methadone, they're admitted to the OTP PRU, and if they're not, they're admitted to the clinic PRU, and then the billing flows from there. There are, in general, potential times when somebody might for a short period of time be open in both of those PRUs. But hopefully that's going to end, that would end, once we have this single PRU. So.
Mm. Okay, so the other thing that we wanted to do today, besides answer questions, which is very important, is solicit some feedback. Because obviously, as we've mentioned, we are moving in the right direction. But at the same time, we want to know, what is holding you back from integrating. Also, for those, especially for those who have integrated, moving forward, what would, help with future integration. So if you want to raise your hand, share in the chat. We're trying, especially since, well, we want to um make sure that between now and the time there's one PRU, that this is as smooth as possible. So we want to take some feedback from you and see if that's something that we can, if there's things that you need that we haven't thought about, we could possibly add that to future funding. And also we can also consider you, if there's other things, how do we implement that when we implement the one PRU? In addition, after we go through this, I will talk a little bit about how do you integrate. but I just want to get some feedback from the field at the same time. In geographic areas where OTP censuses are generally in decline, are there any thoughts about how to stabilize existing OTPs when newly integrated programs add OTP services? How to ensure there is adequate nursing, for example? Leslie, Pat, want to take a stab at that?
Sorry, Jason, I was actually just responding to an urgent email. Forgive me. Can you please repeat that?
So, in geographic areas where OTP censuses are generally in decline, are there any thoughts about how to stabilize existing OTPs when newly integrated programs add OTP services? And then specifically, how to ensure that there's adequate nursing, for example.
So I think just what we were talking about previously is that, having these enriched services in OTP, incorporating the outpatient services definitely will will bring about more robust, I believe, patient population. In terms of staffing, we're all terribly aware of the staffing shortages across the region, but I know that you're not alone in those concerns. I think that the funding is available to, like we said earlier, to develop new staffs for these initiatives. So, what that looks like for your particular program in terms of, pay, positions, etc. You'd have to definitely email Jason and this team it's to fulfill the scope of work, but we can work with you to answer those on an individual basis to help you with your staffing patterns.
And also, I'm seeing some responses that are related to space and capital funding, and like we did mention, there are ways to get capital funding, and there is, renovation funding in the prior RFA, and also if slash when we put out future, we anticipate that as well. But I would say reach out to me if you're contemplating integrating, and especially if space is a limitation, maybe we could get creative, figure out ways to do it. Don't let that just be the roadblock without at least speaking to us first. Again, funding is a big issue. And space, that's another one.
Jason, if we
Yes.
could just pivot back for a second, if you're an OASAS provider that is net deficit funded at this time, I believe you're eligible for minor maintenance for your program. Capital project often takes a lot longer, but a minor maintenance application can be done through, we would recommend if it's related to integration to do it through this team, but also your regional office can help you navigate that as well.
Um, Workforce recruitment, yes. I know in our discussions with programs who are integrating, who are opening new OTPs, that is a big one. I mean, we again in the funding we provided, we have given the ability to utilize it for searching for staff, for potential signing bonuses. So we're giving, leeway on how you use the funding, especially when it comes to staffing. But yes, we're well aware that, there are shortages in and especially in certain regions, in counselors, medical staff, um, as well. I imagine the paperwork is abundant. Um, For integration, it really isn't. For, obviously for capital projects, I would agree there's probably a lot of information that is being requested. But the integration itself is we specifically kept it short and to the point. so as to not make it a very overburdening process.
Jason, you have 3 raised hands. Do you want me to just unmute them one at a time?
Yeah. I know 2 of them were raised from the beginning, so let's see.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just
Yeah.
unmute Kara and see if she has, maybe I will, or maybe I won't. Oh, I won't. I can't. I thought I was special.
Let's see.
You got it, Jason.
Yeah, I think you can only send a request. Usually you can unmute. All right.
Jason, I think only you can do that as the host.
Yeah, it's not okay. Here we go. No, when I say it, when I do unmute, it just says request.
So I guess Tara, Jordan, and Hussar, you might have to put your question in the chat.
Yes, please. In some cases, adding outpatient services to an OTP may be less problematic. Yes, a lot less work. In some cases, really, there's probably nothing to be done except hiring an extra counselor, a peer, and that's it. There really isn't. I mean, obviously, there's some paperwork and applications, but it really is a lot less work than adding an OTP. Another question, comment: workforce shortages is a continuing challenge. Salaries need to be adjusted. One solution is to increase rates so we can attract staff.
And I do that, and when you're talking about rates, I'm sure you're talking about Medicaid rates, and there has been a 5% adjustment. There is a 4% COLA coming, that will be effective April 1, but won't actually, it'll take time for for it to actually show up in rates, but it'll be retroactive. And there are other rate adjustments that are being currently worked on between OASAS and Department of Health. And so we definitely recognize the need for that, to the extent that we have the ability in the budget to be able to do that. I do think that there are ways to work together. I mean, in some ways, this allows for some staff sharing that might be able to, help your outpatient program by having availability of medical staff on the OTP side, or if so the sharing of staff could be helpful. But granting that if you're an outpatient program and you're adding OTP services, you're going to have to recruit nurses, and this is a really difficult time to do that. I just totally understand that, and you have to consider that, I guess, when you're making your own decisions. And we are doing what we, as Jason was just identifying, things to make nursing in addiction services more attractive to people, providing some of this funds. But even with all of that, we're competing across the healthcare marketplace that's just really in a crisis around workforce right now.
Could we be funded for integrated program with primary focus to build programming for families and significant others of OTP patients? So when the RFA is out, there are criterias in the RFA. In the past that, we do give leeway in some of the questions for, unique and different types of services. At the same time, that would be a great use of integration. But however, I think a primary focus as well is to increase access to care. So it shouldn't be your only use of integration, but one of your uses of integration. But that is thinking outside the box. And again, especially when there's one PRU, it would be a lot easier to do. And even now, I know some programs have gotten creative in doing that as well. Am I understanding correctly that around October this year, PRUs will be merged? That's our hope. From conversations we've had, it sounds realistic. So obviously, as we get closer, we'll share more information. But yes, that is where our thought process is now.
That's our target. And, you know,
Yeah.
that we have yet to talk to IT about their ability, and, you know, but we're hopeful. I would say that we're cautiously optimistic right now from where we stand today.
As a
Jason,
new,
I see something right in the chat. I was so eager to share this. Says it's a new integrated program I'd like to share. It's been so beneficial to the community. And that's from Thomas Olivo. Happy to hear that you're anticipating more. Thank you for looking into the PRU situation. It's good to
thank
hear.
you, Thomas. Those services are very needed as well. So thank you. Um, Biggest concern about expanding or adding additional OTP services is to fund the mechanism, not keeping pace with regulation changes, i.e., enhanced take homes being proposed at the federal level could cause a significant hit to OTP incomes.
So so that the bundle rates take into account a decrease in people coming to the clinic. And one of the ways I think to prepare for a potential decrease, you know, even you know, if people were getting, you know, a lot of people were getting many weeks, there may be a decrease in both cost and revenue on for the OTP. However, if you're also adding services that you hadn't provided before, the time that may be freed up by the staff could be utilized to provide a different set of services. So that's exactly the way we want you to be thinking. So I really appreciate that question and comment by whoever asked it, because it's an important question to start asking. What is both the clinical and fiscal world going to look like? Because we know it's changing. And so how can you as a program get prepared to be able to, you know, thrive in that new environment? And so there will be changes in OTPs, you know, based on the federal flexibilities by demand. You know, I mean, that could substantially increase demand if people are coming in and expecting a different set of a different experience from being on methadone. And if you were to expand the types of services you provide, where are the gaps in the service delivery system where you are? What is there a group of people who may not be being engaged in treatment because they just don't feel like they're being welcomed? Is there a type of service that you could add with the existing staff that you have, and utilize maybe some of that time that may not be utilized if you're seeing people less often for the take-home medication? So I appreciate that question. I thank you for asking it.
So at this point, there's no other questions, and we're running short on time. So for any further questions, and also if anybody who's interested in integrating, please reach out to me. Especially if you do have questions, I would say reach out sooner rather than later, because if there is funding released, that will limit how much we can talk about integration. So I would recommend, you know, ask your questions now, share your concerns before the time where we can't answer the questions. Um, you know, as I said, if you would like the application and the guidance, please reach out as well. I'll share that with you. If you want to have a further conversation, we could set some time up. But all of that, I would recommend sooner rather than later, because again, we won't be able to do that when funding is released. Let's see. Last one, just to share, like we're sure, share that there's a conference symposium on June 21st, and there will be a session on integration. Looking forward to that as well. No, the application and guidance is not on the OASAS website. Reach out to me, Jason Rubenfeld. I can share my email. So although I believe everybody should have it at this point, but I'll share my email. And see, I think that is all with questions. Pat, Leslie, any final words?
There's a question here about application and guidance on the OASAS
Yeah.
webpage. Jason, did you answer that one?
Yes. No, if you need the application and the guidance, reach out to me and I will share it with you.
Well, I'm good then. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Thank
All right.
you. I am too. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And again, any questions, please reach out. All right. Bye.
Bye.